I'm Maria Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week, we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, the U.S. pledges $145 million in assistance as first major step toward making TRIPP initiative a reality. Turkish delegation led by a special envoy crosses the Margara Crossing into Armenia for the 6th round of normalization talks. And Defense Ministry proposes shortening compulsory military service by 6 months. Tune into our weekly roundup of the news with me, Maria Titizian, and Rubina Margosian.
On September 12, a Turkish delegation led by Special Envoy Sardar Kilic crossed the Margara Crossing into Armenia for the 6th round of normalization talks. They were welcomed by Armenia's envoy Ruben Rubinian. Unlike earlier meetings in third countries, this round took place in Yerevan, a sign of shifting dynamics. Last year, the delegations met right at the border. The agenda of the latest talks has not been made public. Kilic posted on X thanking his counterpart for what he called a warm meeting. Rubinian had said earlier that the entire normalization agenda was up for discussion. Previous rounds have produced agreements on opening the border to third country citizens and diplomatic passport holders, restoring the historic Ani Bridge, and assessing the Gümrük-Kars railway, but none of these commitments have yet been implemented. Rubinian and Kilic were first appointed as special envoys in late 2021 when Armenia and Turkey revived dialogue after the 2020 Artsakh war. For decades, progress has stalled as Turkey linked normalization to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict after the war and the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh. Ankara tied it to a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but following the Washington summit in August, Turkish officials suggested there may be new momentum for talks.
And this week, the United States pledged $145 million in assistance to Armenia aimed at boosting trade, infrastructure, critical mineral supply chains, and cross-border security. Brendan Hanrahan, senior bureau official at the State Department, called it the first major step toward making the TRIPP initiative a reality. The Trump administration is working with Congress to finalize the assistance package. According to the U.S. Embassy in Yerevan, the visit is part of efforts to strengthen bilateral ties and expand cooperation across key areas of mutual interest within the Armenia-U.S. strategic partnership. In Yerevan, Hanrahan also met with Deputy Prime Minister Meir Grigoryan to discuss regional developments, prospects for unblocking communications, and the broader significance of TRIPP, which is the Trump Road for International Peace and Prosperity. This was signed back in August.
And after a long pause, the border commissions of Armenia and Azerbaijan met last week near Syunik in Armenia and Zangilan in Azerbaijan. The delegations led by Deputy Prime Ministers Meir Grigoryan and Shahin Mustafayev even made reciprocal visits across the border. The meeting followed agreements reached in Washington in August. Talks focused on border delimitation, demining, and building new infrastructure, with both sides aiming to coordinate their efforts. Foreign Minister Mirzoyan said updates on the process could be expected soon. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan also responded to opposition criticism that there are no security guarantees. He pointed to the Tavush village of Girans, where the border was demarcated last year, calling it exemplary. He said 50 new homes are now being built there, pushing back against opposition claims that residents would leave. So far, about 12 kilometers of the nearly 1,000-kilometer Armenia-Azerbaijan border have been formally demarcated.
Well, opposition MPs took the government to task during the first parliamentary session of the season for leaving out key issues in the Washington agreements, including the fate of Armenian prisoners and the rights of Artsakh Armenians. Lawmakers also sought clarity on whether Armenian border and customs officers would inspect Azerbaijani documents and cargo, and whether Armenia's judicial system would apply to Azerbaijanis. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan explained that modern border control mechanisms would largely eliminate the need for any human contact. Thereby, Armenian border guards would only personally check passports and documents if technical issues arise. He stressed that Armenia's laws are applicable to everybody, including Azerbaijanis. During the Q&A, the head of the State Revenue Committee reiterated that the country's customs service will operate on the Trump Road, noting that the details will be worked out in the future, because this had been one of the talking points, if you will, in the public discourse about it. And Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan said Armenia is working with Azerbaijan to reopen communications. He noted ongoing discussions with U.S. partners on joint railway and infrastructure projects, emphasizing that humanitarian issues, including the release of prisoners and clarifying the fate of the missing, remain a priority. Mirzoyan added that while challenges may persist, the risk of escalation with Azerbaijan is currently limited.
And presenting the central bank's annual report in Parliament this week, Armenia Central Bank's head, Martin Galician, said that the potential signing of a peace agreement with Azerbaijan could have a huge impact on Armenia's economy by lowering the country's risk premium and attracting foreign investment. He noted that recent signals from international partners have been largely positive following the agreements reached in Washington last month. Galician explained that easing geopolitical risks are already shifting perceptions of Armenia's economy, and this could also influence the central bank's monetary policy, including interest rates, which have been steadily lowered over the past 2 years. Galician highlighted that despite geopolitical tensions and ongoing uncertainties, Armenia kept strong economic momentum in 2024, fueled by growth in service, construction, and trade. In the second half of the year, however, the economy slowed slightly, with growth settling near a sustainable long-term level of 5.9%. Galician noted that easing demand and rise in labor supply helped stabilize the labor market. Wages held steady, prices for services showed little movement, and inflation expectations remained anchored. But by year's end, 12 months inflation was 1.5%, with core inflation at 0.9%.
Azerbaijan's parliament held an extraordinary session this week to discuss, of course, the Washington agreements, what we've been talking about here. Lawmakers voiced full support for the accords and declared their readiness to back its implementation. Aliyev also, once again, spoke about the so-called Zangezur corridor this week, expressing confidence that it will soon become a key transport link of the Middle Corridor connecting continents. He added that the pre-signing of the peace agreement creates opportunities not just for the region, but for a broader international landscape. It's astounding that he keeps using this term, and there's been a lot of discussion about route, corridor, all of this,
Yeah.
and he's doing it to obviously
Get a reaction.
Well,
this week, ambassadors accredited to NATO met with Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, Defense Minister Suren Papikyan, and other officials to discuss the Armenia-NATO partnership. The leaders emphasized the importance of continued cooperation, regional security, and Armenia's reform agenda, highlighting the role of international partnerships in advancing stability and development in the region.
Following his trip to France last week, Security Council Secretary Armen Grigoryan visited Austria, Slovakia, and Germany, holding consultations with senior officials across various government sectors. Discussions focused on bilateral relations and strengthening Armenia-EU ties.
And Armenia's defense ministry has put a draft law on the government's e-draft platform that would shorten compulsory military service by 6 months. Now, Maria, we usually don't speak about draft laws that haven't passed yet in the week in review, but this one is kind of quite exceptional and worth a discussion. The proposal is part of the government's 2021-2026 program and is expected to lower the overall cost of conscription. Officials have also confirmed that military spending will not increase in 2026. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan explained that the sharp rise in this year's defense budget was tied to settling future debts and obligations, including in the defense sector. And as a result, defense spending next year, this is in 2026, is projected to remain flat or even slightly decrease compared to this year. Pashinyan stressed that this will not undermine Armenia's security, saying the defense system will continue on a path of normal development. He added that additional factors influenced the decision and said he's ready to discuss them with Parliament in a closed-door session.
And Parliament has passed a new higher education and science bill. Education Minister Janna Andreasyan says the law offers a fundamentally new perspective for universities and research institutions. The reforms aim to make higher education more inclusive, transparent, and internationally connected. They also strengthen academic autonomy and clarify how research is regulated. The National Academy of Sciences will now focus more on providing expert guidance and strategic research with fewer administrative burdens. Overall, the government says that the goal is to modernize Armenia's higher education system and make it more competitive at home and abroad.
Spartak Ghukasyan, the son of Gyumri's controversial mayor Vartan Ghukasyan, has been detained on charges of extortion by coercion. The investigative committee has not provided details, but the mayor says the arrest is politically motivated ahead of next year's parliamentary elections. He claims the case goes back more than a year and involves construction materials worth just 90,000 drams. This is about $230. Ghukasyan also suggests the detention may be linked to his son's attendance at Archbishop Mikhail Ajabahian's court hearing. This is, however, not his first brush with the law. In 2007, he was involved in a daylight shootout that left 2 people wounded and later served a year and a half in prison. He has also been linked to shootings in 2009 and 2012.
Well, this week, Catholicos Garegin II visited Archbishop Mikhail Ajabayan in custody. His spokesperson said the Catholicos had earlier sought permission to also visit Bakrat Galastanian and businessman Samvel Garabedian, but those requests were denied. Ajabayan is facing charges of calling for the seizure of power. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Pashinyan announced that discussions are underway regarding the, quote, timing and organizational matters of the Catholicos' removal. He said the process would culminate in a spiritual gathering in Echmiadzin, stressing compromise is out of the question, Godrich Nersesyan must go, and the sooner the better. So we have lots of interesting things to look forward to. And as always, we talk about the articles that we publish this week. And I guess we can start with today's article, which is called Frontline Observers on Patrol with the EU Mission in Armenia. And it's written by Michele Crestani, who was a TAP intern here. And he spent a day with the monitoring mission down in Sunik. And it's a reflection of that.
And we spoke about TRIPP, the Trump road, a lot. We have an interesting piece by Garen Garcian this week. Well, he's a translator and he looks at Trump's muddled rhetoric on Armenia and Azerbaijan, exploring how language, translation, and spectacle mask authoritarian impulses. It's a very long, somewhat, but very interesting read from a unique perspective.
Indeed, it's called A Portrait of Trump, Lost in Translation. And we have a piece by another intern that we had from CUNY, Gibran Boyce. It's called Subsoil Security, the State of Mining and Armenia's Mineral Wealth. And she asks, and we've written about this, and one of our security briefings was called Mining for Security, is could Armenia's mineral wealth, that has long been dominated by Russian companies, emerge as a strategic asset, not only in the global race for critical minerals, but how it now kind of intersects with economic independence, national security, and Armenia's geopolitical diversification.
Also, this week we had Sheila Palan's monthly installation of her column. This time it's called Arch Biases, and she explores the biases we all carry, how they shape our views, and what it takes to confront them honestly to find freedom on the other side.
And our monthly Up Close and Personal podcast that I did with Yerevan Zoryan. And we had a great time doing that podcast because, we get to spend time and talk and sort of tease out all the information from interesting people. He's an engineer, a pioneer, innovator, and world authority on self-repairing electronic systems, which in the podcast I say I have no idea, but he explains it. So he bridges technology with a deep commitment to Armenia's future, and he's the chief architect at Synopsys, president of Synopsys Armenia, founder of the Armenian Virtual College, and many, many other hats. And he has spent decades shaping the global tech industry while expanding educational opportunities for Armenians, not only in Armenia, but worldwide.
And a very pleasant person to converse with.
Very pleasant,
it was very nice having him at the office. But also this week we published our Art Digest, Itinerary. We're doing monthly installations now. It was bi-monthly before. And I'm always confused, but twice a month before. But now it's monthly.
And it's comprehensive and it's a good overview.
And we update halfway through the month with new events. So also check that out if you're in Armenia and would like to go to some of the cultural
Right.
events.
And next Friday, I won't be here because I will be traveling to the United States. We are bringing EVN Talks to the East Coast and the West Coast, a series of panel discussions, at Berkeley, Stanford, MIT, AGBU New York, and these conversations will tackle Armenia's challenges, opportunities in the areas of security, diplomacy, democratization, and technology, and maybe education if you can hear all the children screaming in the background. We have a daycare by our office. So anyway, so that's going to be September 22 in the Bay Area, 24 in New York, 26 in Boston. So you can check out.
All the information is on our
everywhere.
website. We'll keep it on the front page, right at the top right corner throughout these events. So at any point, wherever you are, if you want to go, you can always find the details on our website.
Definitely check it out. And I hope to see you there if you can make it. And that's the kind of week it's been here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we will be back again next week.